Have you noticed that some conversations only become possible at certain times? Not because you suddenly became braver, not because the other person changed, but because something in the atmosphere shifted, and words that felt impossible yesterday suddenly flow today. Over the next 3 days, January 28th through 30th, that shift is happening again. But here's what most people don't realize about this window. It's not about what you say, it's about what becomes sayable. If you've felt something building lately, a restlessness without a name, a sense that words are trying to find their way out but you can't quite locate them, you're picking up on something real. Many people describe feeling exactly this in the weeks before this particular period begins, and there's a reason for that sensation. Something is aligning, but what it actually affects is rarely what people expect. Let me show you what I mean. Between now and January 30th, a pattern repeats that's been observed for centuries. Same time frame, same effects, over and over across different cultures, different eras, different contexts. People report that conversations they've been avoiding suddenly feel possible. Words they couldn't find before suddenly appear. The distance between what they feel and what they can express starts to close. This has been documented consistently, not as belief, as observation. But here's where it gets interesting. The pattern isn't new. What's unusual is the context it's happening in right now. 2 days ago, on January 26th, something shifted that only happens once every 165 years. A long cycle transition began, and it's still moving through the collective atmosphere as you're hearing this. In symbolic timing frameworks, systems that track recurring human behavioral patterns, this kind of transition correlates with shifts in how entire generations think about possibility, about what's achievable, about what courage even means. And it's right in the middle of this massive background shift that the 3-day window we're talking about is opening. But that's not all. Yesterday, January 27th, something else converged. An alignment that historically correlates with sudden surges of determination, clarity about what needs to change, an energy that feels palpable but impossible to name. If you felt something shift inside you yesterday, a resolve you couldn't explain, a restlessness that felt different from usual anxiety, that's what many people were picking up on. And that energy hasn't dissipated. It's now mixing with what's opening over these 3 days, adding weight to whatever gets expressed, adding intensity to whatever finally finds words. So here's what you're actually in the middle of right now. 5 celestial positions have converged in the same constellation. This creates what observers call a stellium, a concentration that throughout history has coincided with significant shifts in collective behavior and individual psychology. Now, does this mean the sky is controlling you? No, but it does mean you're in a period where a documented pattern tends to repeat, where certain things that were stuck suddenly unstick, where expression that felt blocked suddenly flows. And if you're sensing that something is different right now, you're not imagining it. Let me tell you what's actually aligning during these 3 days. But first, you need to understand what these alignments don't do. They don't make conversations happen for you. They don't magically fix communication. They don't guarantee understanding. What they do, according to centuries of pattern observation, is create conditions, favorable circumstances, like fertile soil for seeds that are already trying to grow. The seed is already there. The impulse to speak is already present. The truth is already forming. What shifts during these periods is accessibility. Between January 28th and 30th, 2 planetary positions align in a specific constellation, Mercury and Venus, meeting in Aquarius, in symbolic frameworks that track human behavior patterns. Mercury represents thought transmission and communication structures. Venus represents relational dynamics, how we connect, what we value in others, our capacity for affection and harmony. When these two converge, their themes merge. Communication takes on warmth, connection becomes more articulate, and people consistently report being able to express difficult feelings with unusual clarity and care. But here's what's interesting about this particular alignment. It's happening in Aquarius, and Aquarius in symbolic language is associated with authenticity over performance, truth over pretense, the willingness to be seen as you actually are, rather than as you're expected to be. So during these 3 days, the words that come through may carry more of your actual self, not the edited version, not the socially acceptable version, but something closer to core truth. For some people, this is terrifying. The vulnerability of being genuinely seen is one of the most challenging human experiences. The risk of rejection, the exposure, the possibility that your truth won't be received well, but it's also where the deepest connections form. And this is the part that's rarely talked about. Most people think communication is about finding the right words, but what shifts during periods like this isn't your vocabulary, it's your willingness. The barrier isn't language, it's permission. The permission you give yourself to speak what's true, even when it's uncomfortable, even when you can't predict how it will be received, even when it makes you vulnerable. And during these 3 days, that permission becomes more accessible. Not guaranteed, but more accessible. Now here's something most people miss about this specific window. For months, since late 2025, many people have felt stuck around expression. Words that wouldn't come, truths that resisted articulation, feelings that stayed locked inside even when you tried to name them. This wasn't random. It corresponded with patterns that in symbolic timing frameworks tend to make expression more difficult. When certain configurations occur, communication becomes complicated, emotions become hard to locate, clarity becomes elusive. If you experience this, you were part of a widespread cycle, not something wrong with you, a collective pattern. And what's happening now is the shift. Think of it like this. A seed buried in winter soil looks inactive from the surface, but beneath the ground, transformation is constant. Roots spreading, forces gathering, preparation happening invisibly. The period you moved through wasn't empty. It was gestation. And now between January 28th and 30th, conditions align for what was developing beneath the surface to break through. The words that were forming in silence may finally find their pathway out. But here's what you need to understand. This alignment creates favorable conditions. It doesn't do the work for you. You still have to choose. You still have to decide. Am I willing to speak what's true? Am I willing to risk the vulnerability that authentic expression requires? That choice is entirely yours. The alignment simply makes that choice easier to act on. Here's what people consistently report during these periods. Conversations flow with unexpected ease. Topics that normally feel impossible to approach come up naturally. The right words arrive without excessive deliberation. There's a grace in communication that wasn't present before. You might feel a stronger pull toward meaningful exchange. Not small talk, but genuine desire for conversation that matters. An impulse to reach out to someone you haven't spoken with in a while. These impulses aren't random. They're responses to the energy that's available. Some people experience this more internally. Insights about themselves surface without effort. Understandings they've been seeking suddenly clarify. Patterns that were invisible become obvious. Another pattern that appears. Conversations that need to happen sometimes simply arise. Someone approaches you wanting to discuss something significant. Moments emerge that you weren't planning, but that feel important. At first, these feel like coincidences, until you notice how consistently they appear during these specific windows. And you might be thinking, what if I don't know what to say? Here's what's interesting about how this energy reportedly works. It doesn't operate through rational planning. It works through presence. You don't need to script every word. What matters is being available, staying open, trusting that what needs to be expressed will find its way when the moment arrives. There's another element here that's crucial. Communication isn't just speaking. During these alignments, people report enhanced capacity, not just to express themselves, but to genuinely hear others, to catch not just words, but the feeling underneath them, the meaning that lives between the lines. If someone opens to you during these days, receive it as valuable. Be completely present. Don't formulate your response while they're speaking. Just listen. This quality of attention is rare, and according to observation, it creates space where real connection can happen. Now here's something that needs to be said clearly. Not all relationships are healthy. Not all communication is loving. Sometimes the most authentic expression involves setting boundaries, saying no with clarity and firmness. standing in your truth, even when it makes others uncomfortable. If there's something in your life that needs to change, this period might help. It offers language for difficult conversations, courage for truths that have been avoided, clarity about what you actually want and need. This is where most people get the alignment wrong. They think it's about harmony, about making everything smooth, about finding words that keep everyone comfortable. But authenticity doesn't always create comfort. Sometimes it creates necessary disruption. Sometimes speaking truth means ending what wasn't working. Sometimes the most loving thing you can say is goodbye. And during these 3 days, that kind of clarity becomes more accessible too. Let me show you the larger pattern you're inside of right now. 2 days ago, Neptune entered Aries, beginning a 13-year cycle. In symbolic observation, Neptune correlates with collective imagination, spirituality, idealism. In Aries, this energy becomes active, courageous, pioneering. What this means practically, the words you speak during these 3 days may carry more momentum than usual. Not in some magical sense, but in the sense that timing matters, that declaring something clearly during a period of broader transition can set direction for years ahead. Imagine you have something you want to create, a change you want to make, a dream you've been holding privately. Now imagine expressing that clearly during this window, speaking it to someone you trust, or writing it down with full intention. That expression gains particular weight during this alignment. You're planting seeds during a period that historically correlates with new cycles taking root. And it's not only major declarations that matter. Small expressions of care also gain significance. A genuinely meant thank you, and I love you, that normally goes unsaid. A you matter to me, that usually stays internal. These small words create ripples that extend far beyond their moment. Think about language for a second. Every word you speak literally shapes your reality, not metaphorically. Literally. Your words create the relational world you inhabit. They open doors or close them. They build bridges or burn them. They heal wounds or deepen them. So during these 3 days, pay attention to what you're creating with your words. Before you speak, pause. Ask yourself, is this true? Does it come from a genuine place? Does it express something that matters? If the answer is yes, speak with confidence. What to expect over these 3 days varies by person, but certain patterns show up consistently. You might notice unexpected lightness in expression. Words that normally require effort simply flow. Moments where you surprise yourself, not because what you said was inappropriate, but because it was more honest than you expected. Some people report increased emotional openness, greater receptivity to feeling in general. This is one influence, theoretically softening defensive patterns that normally keep feelings locked away. Others experience enhanced mental clarity. Confused thoughts suddenly organize. Mental fog lifts. This is another influence, supposedly illuminating thought patterns. If you feel tired or need solitude, that's also been reported. Sometimes silence is needed to process what's shifting. Respect that need if it arises. Here are some practical approaches for these 3 days. Before important conversations, take a few deep breaths. This creates space for whatever wants to move through you. It calms your nervous system and opens you to what needs expression. Don't force anything. If a conversation isn't flowing naturally, don't push. The right moment will reveal itself. Pay attention to your dreams. These periods have historically been associated with meaningful dream content. Keep a notebook nearby if you want to capture what emerges. If you feel drawn to write. Written expression benefits from this alignment too. Journal, letter write, text. Whatever form feels right. Sometimes writing clarifies what speaking can't. And practice gratitude. Express appreciation where you genuinely feel it. Gratitude is one of the most powerful forms of communication that exists. But here's what I really want you to understand. This information isn't prediction. It's not telling you what will happen. It's describing a pattern that repeats across time, a window that opens periodically. You're encountering this now because something in you was already attuned to these cycles, not because fate placed it in front of you, but because you have an awareness that picks up on shifts before they become obvious. The words you speak between January 28th and 30th have potential. Not guaranteed potential. Not destined potential. But real potential. To shift relationships that have been stuck. To address wounds that have been festering. To open doors that seemed permanently closed. To plant seeds for futures your deeper self already recognizes. Don't underestimate the power of a single authentic conversation. An "I love you" said at exactly the right moment. A truth spoken after years of silence. A boundary set with clarity and care. These are small revolutions that, according to those who've experienced them, can transform entire lives. And you're not alone in this. Many people are feeling this same pull toward authentic expression right now. There's a collective current forming during these days. Whether that's caused by planetary positions or simply a psychological cycle, these positions help us track. That question remains open. What matters is the pattern itself and what becomes possible inside it. The next 3 days offer something. Not a guarantee, not a promise, but a window. A moment when words that normally stay buried can find their way to the surface. When conversations that felt impossible become possible. When the distance between what you feel and what you can say gets smaller. That window is open now. What you speak into it is entirely up to you.